process we're going to be using this evening. A little history. 2015, per state statute, we put together a revised POCD. Connecticut requires this POCD every 10 years. The last one was in 2005. It is required to get the reason you do a PCD is required to get certain state funds. It becomes a justification for a new development. If a new development is proposed and we are opposed to it, we have a POCD that says, listen, we've thought about this and we don't really want this. It becomes it's the blueprint for the town. That's what this thing is. So the POCD process, just quickly, included multiple charrettes, open meetings to get input from residents of the town. Overwhelming conclusions were the need for a town center, a place to get coffee. These are notes that were put up on the board if anybody was at the charrette. A place to get coffee, places to shop, sidewalks. We heard people ask things like, why can't we have a street like Madison or Westport or New Canaan or Milford? Sidewalk cafes, a place to meet your neighbors, buy a paper, get some Danish. Maybe there's a bookstore, maybe there's another gift shop, another gift shop. A place for a brunch, benches to sit down. Every one of those towns have street level retail and either apartments or offices above them. I'm sure most of you have been to those towns. That's what those buildings are. They're 2 and 3 stories, and above there's either offices or apartments. And the other great concern, obviously, the POCD was keeping the rural characteristics of the town that we live in. Scenic roads, saving stone walls, and keeping our tree-lined streets. Previous to the POCD, or around the same time, the Economic Development Commission engaged the services of Alan Plattis, who did an economic study of Woodbridge. His conclusions were similar to the POCD and what is being discussed tonight. This is just a discussion. This is just a draft proposal to get input from you. Nothing is etched in stone, and we are here to listen and evaluate your comments. As you know, all of our meetings are open to the public and televised, except for this one, which is going to be later. The POC Commission has been working, the P&Z Commission has been working on the POCD and the regulation proposal for over 5 years. The commission is composed of residents of Woodbridge who love Woodbridge as much as you do. But we are volunteers, and we have volunteered for this commission because of our love and respect for this town. Just a few items that might interest some of you. In putting together the draft proposal regulation for this evening's meeting, we have heard from a number of people, not everybody in the commission is aware of this, but we have heard from some people who knew how to get through to us on our phones, and there have been a few changes to straighten out some confusions of what people are looking at. One of the biggest mistakes was, and I apologized for why it happened. We didn't do it, but the building department distributed a chart that was false and misleading at best. It was not vetted by the commission, and it wasn't vetted by the planning consultants. So this chart I saw at 5:15 on Friday afternoon, and I informed everybody that this was incorrect information. By that point, it had already been put out there. So a couple things that will probably go into any draft regulations. The residential zones of BB, C, and D will remain exactly the way they are. There's no changes in those residential zones. And the Dev 1 development zone will also remain as it is right now. Now, keep in mind, in the Dev 1, you are allowed to do retail, you're allowed to do offices, you're allowed like things like the Willows, Coachman Square. Those are the kind of things that are allowed in Dev 1. It means the largest chunk of the property right now is the 55 and over project that's been approved. If that doesn't go through, something else can come in there. Probably not housing, but it could easily be a big box, to be honest with you. First, we're going to have some comments from me. Marianne Dubuque, the lawyer that the P&Z uses, is going to say a few things, and then Leslie Crean, the planner consultant, will give a presentation overview. After which we will take comments, suggestions. We're not going to be answering any questions. We don't really want to be in this position where we're shooting from the hip. This worked out well in the POCD, where we can take the information back and really analyze and see what people are saying. Now, again, this is just a draft proposal. It's to get a discussion going. I feel like we're going to have a discussion tonight. And even after this meeting, it goes back to planning and zoning. It doesn't get voted on. Before it can be voted on, it has to go to a public hearing, which again, everybody can come back and make comments and be able to review the document in any place where we put it, including online. So I'm just asking you to have a discussion. I'm asking everyone to speak with civility and respect. We want your input. That's why we're here. So, Megan. So I guess this is where everyone's going to come up and speak. Please sign your name, address, blah, 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 here so we can keep track of it. But we're also going to be taking notes. So.
Good evening. I was just asked to briefly comment on the legal framework so that everyone understands what the process is under Connecticut law. So first, Connecticut law places the responsibility to oversee an orderly development scheme for Woodbridge in the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The important part of that responsibility is to enact and modify zoning regulations, to address changes in objective factors such as population changes and age trends, and in more subjective factors such as the needs of the community for economic development, for certain types of services, to support regional or state initiatives. In other words, to keep the zoning regulations relevant to your community. Second, as Jeff already mentioned, Connecticut law requires that the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is an advisory blueprint for planning in every single town, be updated every 10 years, and Woodbridge has done a very good job of doing that. That plan has guided how the regulations should be changed, including the proposed regulations that are being discussed tonight. Third, the proposed regulations include some much needed updates. For example, some of the definitions in the regulations date back to the 1980s, and there were no general special exception standards. Although special exceptions are required in certain circumstances, there were no specific standards, which are absolutely essential so that the Commission can have proper oversight over proposed uses that are not automatically permitted, but there's some discretion and there's some important factors that they have to consider, such as traffic and drainage and things like that. So the zoning regulations are meant to be a dynamic document. They're not frozen in time at all, but they are supposed to be modified from time to time as the town changes. Thank you for your attention.
I'm going to try and talk really loud. Can you hear me in the back? Motherhood pays off. My name's Leslie Crean, and I've been hired as the consultant on the to develop proposed regulations for Woodbridge. And I want to go through some slides that will actually, it might help. Can everybody see and read this? I think some of it's going to be a little small.
Blue's a little, white's a little small.
Okay. We can turn the lights down if that is helpful.
I think it's too small.
Okay. This is, I'm going to tell you what it says anyway. With hopefully a little bit more personality than the print. Woo!
You all have to behave.
Oh, darn.
Oh, this could be the most fun meeting I've been to in a while. Okay, so as both Jeff and Marianne have said, this is part of a process. It started with the Plattus report, it started with the updating of the Plan of Conservation and Development, and the next logical step is to then bring on and revise the zoning regulations that are the enforcement arm of the Plan of Conservation and Development. Plan of Conservation and Development is your big picture piece, that's your big vision. Your regulations are what enforces that, what makes what you want happen. So, the directive from Woodbridge has been to, one, allow for the expansion of the tax base in town, try and relieve some of that residential pressure, allow for an increase in economic development so that all of those things that Jeff read off earlier can actually happen. Coffee shops, bookstores, places to get ice cream, whatever. To create an increased center and have a greater identity, give it greater identity to what I'm calling downtown Woodbridge, which I have,
No, it's not downtown.
We don't like.
everybody says something different, so I don't mean any offense to anybody, and if you all agree on one name, I'm happy to use that.
Woodbridge. Woodbridge.
I'm talking about by the area specific, which is important to the conversation.
Village district, we're not downtown.
Okay.
Downtown is here. Yes.
Okay. So, but we all know the area that is in the core of the map. So we all know the area that we're talking about, and also obviously flooding has been an issue, and we want to make sure that nothing that we're doing, not only nothing we're doing, would make flooding issues worse, but we're also looking to implement best management practices so that you don't have those flooding issues by virtue of any development. So, again, we're carrying your ideas forward, trying to put them into a framework that makes it legal to build what you want and also prevents the construction of what you don't want. Okay, so it does both of those things. So, the very sort of down and dirty simple is, if you want to increase your tax base, you need to have more square footage that is taxable. Okay? That's just the math of it. If you have a single-story building, you tax on that single-story square footage. If it's a two-story building, you've actually doubled the amount of square footage that is taxable. Okay? So just keep that in mind. We're not talking about building really tall buildings or anything, so. We also want it to look good. How do we make areas look good in a way that everybody can sort of look at a picture and say, yeah, that looks nice, I like that. There were preference surveys done through the study for the POCD. We did them at the beginning, online at the beginning of this zoning process, and they were done with the Plattus report as well. And the consensus is always the same. People are comfortable with generally the same images, which are places that are walkable, places that have retail or some offices on the first floor, and other sort of quieter, less intrusive uses above, whether it's 1 or 2 stories or 3 stories above. Okay, again, to increase the tax base, to try and relieve some of the pressure from the residential tax base and increase a commercial tax base, you need to allow for good development. That's what developers are looking for. And that's what all of you have said through all of the different public participation that you've been involved in, is you want something that looks good.
Can I say something? We weren't even informed of this meeting.
Okay,
Never mind other meetings.
let's sort of go through the presentation and then everybody.
Yeah, and those are meetings that have been going on for those are projects that have been going on for years, not just, in the last year. So it's not a build it and they will come. You can't just decide you're going to build something and it can look amazing and it will come. That's just not the way the economics works. You really need to allow for good development. Developers need to understand, and residents need to understand, and other property owners need to understand what could be built and what can't be built. I'll get into that in a little more detail in a moment. So some of the elements that make a place attractive. Okay? One of the things, if you just look at these images, these are images that people have said they feel comfortable in. They're no more than, they've been done through the public surveys. So they're no more than 3 stories. They're buildings that are the same on both sides in terms of height and massing. There are things like awnings. There are places for people to sit outside. There's minimal signage, so people don't feel overwhelmed by signs. And there's a variety of architecture. Other elements that make people feel comfortable in a space is when the first floor of a building also has lots of glass. People don't like walking by long, solid walls. That's why storefronts are typically at least 70% glazing. Understanding the space and feeling comfortable in the space that gets created by the 2 buildings on either side of a street. Now, the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't have jurisdiction over the street itself, that's your local traffic authority. But things along the sidewalk, encouraging things like street furniture or the types of street trees, which we are proposing a list of street trees that don't do things like heave your sidewalks or heave your streets and cost you a lot of money in terms of maintenance. There's a list of trees that we've included that are actually good as street trees. Not all trees are good as street trees. Okay, again, another example of things that help to public space feel comfortable. Here, examples of just zones of where people feel comfortable and where the delineations between private space inside of buildings, public space in the middle, where there's landscape space, where you have people feel comfortable sitting outside, and levels of the degree of ownership and privacy.
It looks like Taiwan, China.
Other elements that make places feel comfortable over areas that are covered with, like an arcade. Again, awnings, recessed entries. Similar idea, different style. This isn't about the style of buildings, it's about the elements and how they come together. You need, if you can't, use some imagination and see that you have the possibility to make a place like Lucy Street be a really quaint, lovely street. You can
Come on,
actually,
guys, let's be respectful of the presentation.
you can actually get it done. This is not foreign to Connecticut, okay? People have mentioned Westport, people have mentioned Madison, people have mentioned Guilford, people have mentioned other areas. It's about how the pieces go together.
Where's the car?
Cars, actually, that's a good question. Cars are, generally speaking, you want cars parked either on the street or in the back. And the reason for that is you want people to feel comfortable walking. Okay, so we talked about the districts that will stay the same in addition to A and B were not part of this study at all. C, D, BB, and Dev 1.
Can you tell people where that is?
Sure.
C and D, so they understand where it is?
Absolutely, absolutely. The C district is the residential district around Langdon. It's where those houses are. Landon.
Show us on the map.
Absolutely. It's right here. This is C. I don't know if you can see this. Okay. D is the area over adjacent to the park, the ballpark, on the other side of the river. Okay, that's D. BB is the residential area and all of the open space up here, which is all water, that is further north than Bradley. Okay, so that's staying the same. Dev 1 with Bradley going through it is staying the same. The residential area C here, residential D.
C is staying the same?
Yep. Okay, so those are, let me just get, so the SD1 is changing and this area here is becoming what we call a T4. It's becoming a mixed-use area. Okay.
Please.
So this is,
Let's let her get through the presentation.
We know the streets.
okay, we're talking about what's known as the GB area for the most part. It's the area where you've got Lucy Street, you've got Selden Plaza, you've got the car dealership, you have Katz's Deli, all of that where most of the business is, and going up Amity just about Bradley, on the west side only.
That's DV?
No, that's
T4.
yeah. Okay. So. Okay, the process, by the way, for how you get a permit and all of that, that's all legally laid out. That by state statute, that doesn't change. If you need a zoning permit for something, you come in and you get a zoning permit. If you need to come to the commission for something, you come to the commission. It's the same process that it's always been, so that doesn't change. As Mary Ann mentioned, definitions have been, there are a lot of definitions that have been added because times are different. There are things like, there are things that didn't exist 10 years ago, a lot of cellular stuff. There are definitions that have been taken out because they don't appear anywhere in the document, old or proposed. So that's just a sort of clerical update. The land use tables have been updated to include things, and I'll show you in a minute how it actually gives you, for the most part, much greater control over what you allow. And then also defining basic standards. So I mentioned the street trees earlier. There's no mention in your current zoning regulations about street trees or what kind of trees you can plant. Okay? Nobody talks about whether the roots of a tree that you might want to plant or your neighbor might want to plant will heave your sidewalk or heave the street. So we've got an extensive list of trees that actually work in an area where you have paving. Two things were taken out. And they were taken out of the table, the list of uses, because the state statute changed, and actually it is the Connecticut Siting Council that has jurisdiction over wireless communication and wind energy towers. Okay, so there's no point in keeping them in your regulations if the Planning and Zoning Commission legally has no authority over them. Those are the only two things that were taken out. things that were added or modified. So we started to actually look at things and break them down into slightly smaller parts. So for instance, an animal kennel, and this is just an example, but you can have an animal kennel where somebody boards their animals during the day, like a doggy daycare, for instance. Or you can have a kennel that operates 24 hours a day, which could have a very different impact on a neighborhood, for instance. So it's looking at the differentiation between things and not just calling everything just a kennel, where animals may end up for a few hours or a couple of days or 3 weeks. So it's looking at some of those and listing what kinds of things constitute each of those uses and what level of intensity they are, and then the kind of permitting that would be required. Regulating, we did a lot of regulating by size. So right now, you allow offices generally, but nobody says whether they can be 100,000 square feet, 500,000 square feet, or 10,000 square feet. Just to give you a sense of scale, your normal CVS is about 10,000 square feet. Okay, just to give you an idea of when we're talking about this. Drive-throughs. There were a lot of comments about drive-throughs and whether they should be allowed or not. Some people are in favor of them, some people aren't. There are issues if you have a drive-through adjacent to a residence where you may have cars idling. Okay, you want to be able to control that.
May I? May I ask you a question?
Can we wait till the presentation's
And
done?
I'm not trying to be rude, but am I here for a lesson on zoning and infrastructure? Or am I here because something's trying to be done that will poorly affect every resident in Uptown,
Okay.
where I live?
I'm sorry.
I'm going to keep going.
Let's let the presentation be
I
finished.
have other things to
Well,
do.
okay,
I will
but
see.
this is our process that we're
I'll
using.
come back in
I
other
appreciate it.
meetings.
Thank you.
Wait.
We need to address the traffic first.
I'm going to continue with this, and then I'm happy to listen to anything any of you have to say.
Let's let her finish, guys. It'll be faster.
Okay. Another thing to consider, okay, is that right now you don't distinguish between something like an LA Fitness or a yoga studio. Okay? So we put some checks in that would allow you to control for something like that. Are you looking at, is somebody looking to bring in a business that is really big, like an LA Fitness, that might be considered a major traffic generator? Or is somebody just looking to bring in a yoga studio that has, 5 people? There's a very big difference between the impact that has on an area. This gives the commission the ability to use discretion based upon what's written and to be able to distinguish between things of different sizes. Retail uses. Jeff mentioned the possibility of a big box should the age-restricted housing application not go through. Right now, your regulations allow that because there is absolutely no restriction in terms of square footage of retail uses. We're looking to protect the entire town from things like that by breaking it down and saying these are the kinds of things you can have, these are the kinds of things you can't. Some can be bigger, some can be smaller, and where those things can be, and the level of application that's required. Obviously, if things come to the commission and go to public hearing, that's your highest level of review. So we've looked at it, and we're not looking at, the very biggest right now would be 100,000 square feet, which is roughly the area of the parking plaza, of the shopping plaza where Whole Foods is in Orange. Okay, just again, to give you an idea of scale. Things that have also been included: preservation of historic stone walls, stormwater management. The whole section's been updated by your engineer so that it deals with the best practices in terms of stormwater management. Rooftop equipment concealment, so that not everybody has to look at heating and ventilation equipment. Right now they do. Right now there's no obligation for somebody to conceal that. Safe screening parking from the street. There's no affirmative control over that. Requiring surfaces, pervious surfaces on varying degrees, percentage-wise, depending upon where they are. Requiring pervious surface, again, for flood control, water reinfiltration, all of that. All part of best practices. Back to the street trees, obviously, just an example of trees that are not meant to be on a street. Lighting. Outdoor lighting. We've added a table that requires maximums and minimums of the amount of lighting. Adding landscape regulations to parking lots so that they are less at any point where you have more, you want to put more than what's required. The number of excess parking spaces would have to be pervious so that it's not eating up the land, so that it has to be, you have to have water that can go through it and recharge, and you're not adding to your stormwater runoff. Where you have on the east side of the river, where you have the industrial park, you have an enormous amount of potentially taxable space there that you could be using, and by building in front of the existing buildings, so we're not talking about taking anything down, but building in front of the existing buildings, you actually have the ability to put things in there that would be add to your tax base and be places that people would want to go. It takes some imagination, but if you have that imagination, it's been done.
Guys, let her finish, please.
Almost done. So, again, these are the goals, these are what the charge was, and I hope that you can use your imagination to see the very best that Woodbridge can be. And I'm happy to take comments. We'll be writing everything down. Just write my name.
And just say it out loud. So
My name is Mackenzie Granada. Do you want my address? Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'll speak up. I'm loud anyway. First of all, thank you guys for your service. It sounds like you've been working on this for a very long time, and it's volunteer, so thank you. And I know that most people, zoning meetings are not on their radar and people don't want to go, so it's entirely possible that this has been available for us. I have not heard of this until recently, but feel very strongly about it, like I imagine everyone here does. I agree that people do want the things that were mentioned in the survey, but I disagree that this is the right part of town for that. When people want a center, they are thinking more about the geographical center of the whole town. I also feel that what people are not asking for is an influx of new residents. People are concerned about strains on town resources, schools, the volunteer fire department, the police, and creating a population of 55 and over or age restricted, for which some services may not even exist currently in our town, so would need to be created. Also, people who didn't already grow up in Woodbridge and are now in that age bracket, and have sort of no town loyalty. They didn't put their kids through the school system, so they're not possibly going to be voting that way and putting those resources to keep our schools fantastic and our police department strong. Likewise, rental units that don't contribute as much to the tax revenue as they would drain resources on the town. We have some retail property or buildings there. We have a strip mall on Litchfield Turnpike, right across behind Grimaldi's, that's largely empty. My child goes to school there. I saw a business move out of there, a couple businesses move out of there to other parts of town that people would rather go to, or it's easier to get to because there's congestion on the roadway. So you're also talking about changing the roadways there to make them better. So that's an expensive project. I don't know who's going to pay for that. Please, nothing taller than 2 floors. That's not anything taller than 2 floors. I don't think is the right look for our town, the right fit. If you want something, the plaza where Saloon and Infinity Dental and spacing on what else is there, but I think that's okay if we're going to build something retail or commercial. I think that's the sort of thing that people are looking for, small stores, cozy community stores. Not building something that's, I mean, again, this is not the center, this is not the hub, but if you put something there, what it will do is tear apart the community that is there. I don't see it as a community builder, I see it as a community destroyer. The question on the presentation, can we make Lucy Street like this? I don't know that anybody wants to make Lucy Street like that. And Bradley Street's already sort of going there. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you so much for your time, and go easy on 'em, guys.
We're talking about. Is the SD1 district going to include residential housing? Is the T4 district going to include residential housing or not? That is where we should be starting from. And one more point regarding coffee shops. Anybody have an idea of how many coffee shops there are in Woodbridge? 7. There are 7 coffee shops in this town.
My name is Paul Canalori. Live on Spectre Road on the other side of town. Young family, 3 kids. I saw the presentation, very nice. We talked a lot about trees and awnings. In my mind, I kept waiting for the slide about the residential impact to the town and specifically to schools. And the word school wasn't mentioned once in the presentation, which is the only thing I care about. And the young people of this town, the lifeblood of this town, part of the lifeblood of this town, that's all we care about. And it wasn't even mentioned. So that you're off the mark. Beecher Road School's at 840, 50 students, or it's at the seams, maxed.
Yep.
This will introduce, let's say dozens, let's say 150 net new children, maybe 800, 600 kids, or people, and I'm taking a fraction of that, maybe 100, 200 kids. We can't do, there's nowhere to put them. So any increase in tax revenue, we have to pay for either an addition to the school, new teachers, it's gonna offset. And it'll also tear at the fabric of what is a small community, lovely town, adding a lot of new people. So I hope that the next impact will have a huge section on the residential impact and specifically the schools.
I don't have much to say except for no one's talking about like noise pollution either. I'm from 11 Landon Street, and we now listen to the Willows with their garbage trucks at 6 o'clock in the morning waking me up. And now we're gonna have more buildings with air conditioning units and people, and I hear the nurses coming and going every night, and it's really annoying that I have to suffer for that type of a building to be, you know, waking me up in the middle of the night. They're out there smoking cigarettes, they're out there, they're yelling. No one's talking about noise pollution. So that's one thing I have to say.
Good evening, members of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, and good evening as well to all the residents who are here tonight. I'm so pleased so many people have come out. You all care passionately about Woodbridge. That's why you're here, and that's why I am here. I come tonight to offer my comments to the Commission regarding the proposed changes to the zoning regulations, specifically related to increased building for retail stores and rental units. I think the photos are lovely. It looks like Westville. It looks like Derby, Paris. This is not Westville. This is not Derby. This is not Paris. This is Woodbridge. I have family members who live on Lucy Street, my mother and my brother, and I visit them every day between when I leave town hall. I'm there at all different times of day, even on weekends. Because of that, I've become very well acquainted with the horrific traffic and other issues that affect the quality of life in this area of our town, and this is all our town. Secondly, please remember that this is a neighborhood made up of all of our neighbors. Don't forget that. We are all one Woodbridge. We should be united and not divided, and this issue is dividing our town, as it has in the past. Plainly stated, the quality of life for my family and my mom's neighbors, and me too when I'm down there, has become increasingly difficult. As I said before, there's too much noise, too much traffic, and too much speed. I'm concerned with more development, there will be more of this. I believe the proposed changes to have the potential to not only make it worse. Good development as defined here to some is not good development to others. We need to think about that. I appreciate all the effort you have put into this initiative to update our town zoning regulations. Some of the updates are good. However, I would just urge you to take your time and really listen carefully to all this community input we are hearing tonight. While we all agree that we want to make our town a wonderful place to live, I think it's very important that we all try to do our best to honor the wishes of people who live in the immediate area where some of these changes will have the most impact. Some of these folks have lived here for generations. What is attractive to some is not necessarily attractive to others. With that in mind, I respectfully ask you to rethink some of these changes. Thank you.
Good evening, Kim Kelly Rubin. I live at 6 Warren Road in Woodbridge. Thank you for hosting this meeting tonight. There's a few things that I'm a little confused about, and one of them is where you are considering to build. You have this broken out by zones, but are you talking about off of Bradley Road over by the ball fields, adding buildings supposedly in front of existing buildings there? Is that the area you're speaking of? Okay, so I happen to live in a flood zone in Woodbridge, and I know from a very personal experience that building in a flood zone will greatly impact my home. I am already losing my home to a sinking foundation due to building zones that allowed basements to be built on the water there. So I can't even imagine putting in a building that would displace more water and cause more flooding in this area. I also feel I was a little misled when I did fill out that survey about beautifying Woodbridge, because it really showed Starbucks looking fabulous, like a Paris street. I didn't realize that that was going to carry over into other areas of Woodbridge. When they showed that and asked about your opinion, I really thought we were just talking about maybe adding some one-way streets to help the congestion and the traffic. And the other impact is there is so much that's going to be done down by the Merritt Parkway, Litchfield and Amity in terms of expanding and redirecting the entrances and exit ramps to the Merritt Parkway, as well as, God forbid, a third tunnel. This will really truly impact even worse the congestion that's going on. I'm not talking just about people who live in the Litchfield Amity area. I'm talking about every resident that tries to get out of town.
Yeah.
I have to go right to go left in the morning. There is absolutely no way I can turn left onto Litchfield Turnpike from 6 Warren Road. I have to go up Bond and then down Amity, which is, again, is congested. It just flows a little better because there's more egress to go left at different points. So again, I thank you for this. I know that everyone is very passionate about this, and I hope we will all stay very well informed about what is happening. So I would vote no for any type of building in if it's SD1. Absolutely not. Thank you.
Hello, Kelly Parker, 35 Middle Avenue. I'm actually want to discuss SD1 zone, which I live directly next to, which we already deal with the noise pollution, as the gentleman in the back had said, garbage trucks, the noise from the sports center, the cars racing up and down our street because the GPS takes them down Middle Avenue every day, all weekend long. So I'd like to address that. I also want to address the idea of actually building more buildings in front of the current buildings in the back. I don't understand that concept, so I apologize. However, I think that'll add way too much traffic. We try to walk our dog in the back through that area. You should see the traffic at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. In addition, I'd like to say, trying to get out of Merritt Avenue to go to work, to go to Gateway, we have to run the light, even though there's a do not block the box. So now we're saying, let's add some more buildings, and more people going to work. I never hear the concept of building anywhere but where we live. There's no idea, no one talks about building any further up Litchfield, any further up Amity Road. It's always where we live.
They don't want it ugly up there.
Right. And my family has lived there. My aunt was 96. She lived there 96 years. And it's continuously, if there's a little inch of space to build, it's in our area that everyone's looking to build. Build somewhere else. Think of other ideas.
It'll
Be
never
creative. You're talking about building buildings in front of the current buildings. I don't understand that. Where's everyone going to park that are going to those buildings? On the road? We can barely walk now. There's a baseball field. People race up and down from the sports center. Kids are playing baseball there. I think some consideration, I do appreciate though all the work you are doing. And I just think a little bit more thought needs to go to the people that live in this area. Again, the noise pollution is ridiculous on a Friday night from the sports center. Someone was back there saying they break bottles in the parking lot. I mean, I think, more consideration. I think there'll be way too much traffic. And I do appreciate some of the changes that have been going on, like the gas station has been great. But I'm just really frustrated, I have to say, because it's always you want to add for the taxes. I understand that. Both my kids went through Amity. However, there's other parts of Woodbridge. We're all Woodbridge. I don't think it's up on, it doesn't go any further up Amity Road, then it stops right there. But it could be, there could be more center of town. Why aren't we talking about that?
And get our landlords to straighten up their
The
houses.
landlords, there should be more regulations on landlords for the 2-family houses. I don't know if in your plan also that, because I really didn't get a chance to read it, if, is there gonna be housing in SD1? I know you're not gonna answer the question tonight, but I would think about, there is gonna be housing there? Wow. Bad idea. Seriously, I mean, I think you need to have a little consideration from the people that live here. I know you're trying to beautify and, you know, this area, supposedly. I don't know how many you're gonna add to the school system, in addition to, what is it gonna do to our neighborhood?
What about the tax burden?
I mean, it's really, I know I'm going on, and I apologize, but it's really aggravating now. I mean, it's getting to the point that if there's any little inch of land in our area, you want to jump on it and build. There's the country club. We're not talking about the country club. I know we had all these flyers going out about the country club. Were there flyers coming out about our area so we can have input? I guess there was. Honestly, I didn't get it, but I do follow you on TV. I know you had one person at your last meeting, but I'm getting a little disturbed by it. I think I know you want more taxes. There's got to be a different way. Before adding, I don't know how many buildings you want to add for housing in the back there. Is there any idea? Or what type of housing? I'm just asking questions. Maybe the next presentation, you know, you can give us some further information on that. But thank you for the time to speak.
Hi, everybody. I also want to thank the committee and everybody that volunteers their time to talk to us about these issues in Woodbridge. My name is Michelle Riley. I'm a 4th-generation resident. I live on Landon Street, so I guess that would be in what you're calling, this is C-zone. Not only is my family here, lived here residentially for decades, but we are commercial property owners in the area as well. So we have a lot of different concerns about how this is all going to happen and if it is. But I'd first like to address the fact that we still don't really have a solid plan by the state for the redevelopment of that area. So I'm confused as to why we're even discussing the zoning issues and rezoning and proposing new laws when we don't know what the state has planned for us in that area. So I feel like all this should be tabled until we know exactly what the impact of the redevelopment is going to be. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. We really don't. With state budgets, I just don't see how and when all this is going to happen or when the money and funds are going to be available for this. I understand the need to beautify Woodbridge, and so I have a little different perspective on that whole Lucy Street example. I think that we do deserve a downtown area, if that's what you want to call it. I don't like the differentiation between the two, upper, lower, flats, Woodbridge, all of that. I think that's silly, and it's very outdated thinking. But I think a downtown area would be a nice addition to the town, or a center. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the Litchfield, Amity business district as it is. I think also it could be in a different area of Woodbridge. And I think there is a need for that beautification. I think a dog park, which has been on the table for years, needs to happen. I think there's a lot of things that could happen and make our town even greater than it is. I'm concerned about property values and their increase or decrease with such a plan. Obviously, the impact of such a plan on our volunteer fire department, police, sewers, schools, the grid for electricity, and then the tax breaks. So if this development happens, we have to support that with the services. So if this development happens, we have to somehow pay for the services that are in addition. And I think that's a big concern. So again, I'd like to reiterate the fact that I think this should be tabled until we have a solid plan from the state of Connecticut with a timeline, and then reissue the proposal for zoning laws. Thank you.
My name is Michael Broderick. Also, a lot of people know me as Dr. Mike. I'm one of the veterinarians in town. And I want to comment on a couple things, also as a former zoning commission member. I think one thing you're seeing here tonight is a reaction to your planned overdevelopment. One thing that we looked at the same issues that you looked at in the previous zoning commission. One thing that I think most people in town need to grapple with and really take to heart is that we don't have tons of extra property to develop. And Woodbridge needs to control its taxes by being a little more austere in our spending, because we don't have a post road. We have a very limited business district, and of course, when we were there, we called the area that you're talking about the Village District. And the reason that people liked it, which I don't think you guys really understand, is it considered the residential areas down there as the most important thing in preserving, along with any development that should come. And the one thing that I didn't hear tonight, which I don't quite get, that Woodbridge really, really needs, and which, you know, was already in the zoning regs, is senior housing. And, you know, we're losing residents every day to Fieldstone in Orange. These people, I see them, I know them, they're my clients. They tell me they don't want to move out of Woodbridge. They don't have a choice right now, because the zoning commission is not helping the development along Bradley Road that was already approved occur. And that's one of the things that, if it's done properly, can really create the feel that people want in what, you know, instead of calling it downtown Woodbridge, first of all, I agree with everybody, we're one Woodbridge. But that area, in a sensitive way, we call the Village District because it took people's homes, as I say, as the number one thing, since it's a nice residential neighborhood already. So I think that should be your focus, having more housing in, you know, the old Dev 2, which you call SD1. It seems almost absurd, because that's an area that if you're going to put more business, that's where it should go. That's always how it's been. It doesn't add to our schools. And the whole idea of having additional housing was to meet needs that we have not, which is senior housing. Other than the, you know, rental units the town owns along Bradley Road and Lucy Street, we have none. And that's a huge thing that the town should be pushing for in a very, very thoughtful way on Bradley Road. And, you know, the original development that was approved had commercial space as well. And that developer, I know, wanted to work with the town and was kind of rejected by the last administration and not, you know, not considered very thoughtfully. And that person still owns the land, by the way. And so that's really key, and that should be, that's the most important parcel, by the way, that you guys should be thinking about, because that makes or breaks what our village district is.
Don't forget the golf course.
Yeah, well, the golf course as well, but we're talking about this area. And the other thing is, you know, I think adding lots of multifamily housing beside that, with a school system overburdened, is just going to increase our taxes even more. So you guys should be really, really thoughtful not to do that. You know, those are my major comments. I think changes to the zoning that go away from those principles, we should not do. And I think The main thing is having the residents down in that area respected. The reason that, by the way, they like my building that was built on Litchfield Turnpike, which is a commercial building, there was no opposition, was because it fit into the neighborhood. It looks like a big house. It doesn't make anybody's house diminished. It doesn't lower property values. And that should be the thought process in any kind of commercial development that is built down in that area to help increase our tax base, but get off the idea that that's going to save us, because there isn't enough property left to do that.
Dorothy Martino, 38 Merritt Avenue. I would like to say, first of all, that for a meeting such as important as this, I think the residents who lived in that area where you're talking about developing should have been notified. You talked about having charrettes. We never knew about those. At least a postcard, or if you put a notice in the Woodbridge events bulletin that we get every month. We had to learn about this by word of mouth. And first of all, we were involved, my family goes back over 100 years, and we were involved with changes that were made in the neighborhood when they came in with some of the commercial areas. And we went right along with it because it was properly explained to us. When the last zoning board had the Woodbridge Associates come in about the elderly housing, they met with the residents in the area at least 3 times, listened to them. People who lived on Litchfield Turnpike said, we don't like seeing the backs of the houses facing us. So what they did is they made a mock front of the house so that the residents across the street would be happy with that. They had the fire department involved. They had the police department involved. They had the traffic commission involved. Have you had all these involved? You're talking about going over to the right on Bradley Road. There's a little bridge there with the same access and egress. If you're going to have all these buildings with all these people entering and exiting, has there a study been made of this? How is it going to impact the traffic? And as far as bringing in taxes, it's going to not bring in taxes. It's going to create more taxes, as many of the people have already said. So I wish you would consider. Also, in the last zoning board, they had an architectural review board that when a building came into town, they were under certain things. They had to look at the signage, they looked at the colors, they looked at everything. And I don't see any of that in this zoning regulations. So I would hope that you would consider everything that everybody has said tonight and rethink. And I think most of all, instead of going through all this, we should have seen what you are putting on the other side of Bradley Road. And you're talking about putting buildings in front of those buildings that are already there. Have the people who are in those buildings already been notified? Have they been told about other buildings coming in front of them? I wonder how they would feel. Thank you.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of Town Planning, in zoning, thank you for all the work you do. I know you're a volunteer organization and you spend endless hours with this. However, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, we would like to present valid reasons why the zoning regulation should not be changed. The Gateway to Woodbridge should represent and reflect the rural character of Woodbridge. Big box stores and high-density rental properties represent an urban rather than a rural environment. Under section 1.2, purpose of these regulations, I'd like to quote, to regulate the erection, construction, and reconstruction and use of land in accordance with a comprehensive plan to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers, to promote health and the general welfare, to provide adequate light, air, and to prevent overcrowding of land, to facilitate adequate provisions for transportation. I think you can see where we're going with this. Water, sewage, schools, and parks, and other public requirements for full consideration of the character of the districts, their suitability for particular uses, unquote. With all due respect, the proposed regulations changes are at odds with the purpose of these regulations. Notably, the changes would create more congestion in the streets due to an increase in traffic resulting from high-density housing. We do not believe there are adequate provisions for transportation at present, let alone with more of these apartments. We do not, since 3 major heavily traveled routes intersect in this area, our roads are presently at full capacity. Traffic problems and accidents are occurring at an increased rate. Any increase in population will further stress our roads as well as our first responders. If 2 or 3 bedroom apartments were available, families would rush to Woodbridge to enroll their children in the school system. By the way, our school systems are at or close to full capacity. Additional tax revenue from projects allowed by the new regulations would most likely be absorbed by the increased expenses to the town. The area affected by these regulations, the Woodbridge Village, already has the highest density in Woodbridge. Prior to 2008 recession, the residents of the area agreed to a higher density 55 and over community. As Dorothy stated, these plans took many years to evolve with participation of many residents from the area. The vision of the area was considered complementary to the rural character of Woodbridge. Our residents felt this was acceptable development of the area. There are large parcels of land in other sections of the area, such as the Woodbridge Country Club, that could be developed. The residents in that area refused even a 55 and over development. The residents in the Woodbridge district feel zoning laws as they exist are adequate, since this is already the most diverse and highly density section of town. Perhaps other sections of town should be considered for high density development. If other sections of town would refuse to allow high density development, why should the Woodbridge Village District already has the highest percentage have to absorb more? Residents of the area have experienced traffic jams, flooding, pollution of the West River, and damage to the natural environment. Much work has been done to restore the West River by many individuals and organizations. The West River Watershed Coalition, Save the Sound, West River Restoration and Flood Mitigation Committee, U.S. Fish and Wildlife are a few that were involved. The flooding problems have been improved with the replacement of the Marion Avenue Bridge and the removal of the Honolulu Dam. The Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority has improved the CSOs and the capacity of pollution plant to handle more combined storage of water and sewage before any will be released into the river. The West River receives the stormwater runoff from much of Woodbridge and is at its capacity. More impervious surface from this building will have detrimental effect on the West River and reverse much, if not all, of the improvements made. It is important to note that a greater percentage of pollution is contributed by stormwater runoff than by any other source, including CSOs. It is no coincidence that the West River outflow from Knowles Pond downstream is considered by the DEP to be impaired. Many years of stormwater runoff has taken its toll. Any additional pollution would be devastating to the health of the river. The West River drains 35 square miles and many areas flood with heavy rain. The impact of more impervious surface resulting from zoning changes would be detrimental to the West River as well as the wildlife in and around it. Much of the zoning change is in the immediate area of Knowles Pond. This area between Knowles Pond and West Rock State Park is abundant with wildlife and natural beauty and should be preserved for future generations to enjoy. this area truly represents the rural character of Woodbridge. Thank you. Frank Leo, I own the property down in the area of Litchfield Commons.
No, I don't. Yeah, he grew up there.
I guess you must have figured I might be wrong.
Are you?
Not really. Reputation precedes me. Bob Hill, 68 Acorn Hill Road. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chairman and the entire Commission for the efforts that you've put into the work that you've done. I'm sure the efforts are all well intended, and I think tonight you're learning some of the pushback, a little bit of some learning that's going to take place in terms of some of the adjustments that are probably going to be needed. Unfortunately, in trying to follow best practices, doing what you're doing, sometimes when you overlook something or don't do something, sometimes it's not what you do that creates some of the rub. And I watched the meeting where you were discussing how to notice this meeting, and technically, by just putting it in the paper, met the requirement, okay? Unfortunately, I think you're feeling some of the fallout of that here tonight. The fact that, where do you mail it to? Do you mail it to just people in the village district area? But then, as Christine mentioned in that meeting, you got to mail it to everyone. And we burden ourselves with that. Well, maybe we should have done that. Maybe we should have posted on the website that there was a meeting tonight. That's not criticism. It's just learn from what's taken place. I also will comment on, it's good to learn from what people do in other places, but sometimes learning from what people do in other places can be a little dangerous too. Not everything fits. Some fits, not all fits. Most recently, I've been working with a fairly high volume restaurant operator who operates a number of casual dining restaurants and fast casual restaurants. And I was doing the market plan with them for New Haven County, Hartford, Fairfield County, and Middlesex County. And when we went through going through the towns and where we were looking at, in some areas we actually visited the areas and considered the trade areas where the restaurants we would propose for development. We didn't need to visit Woodbridge. It was already off the list. And the reason for that, it's very simple, okay? And Leslie, you actually made the point in one of the recent meetings. There's not enough population in Woodbridge to support the businesses in Woodbridge. However, the solution is not add more people. That would seem that way on the surface, to add more people. But no, adding more people, yes, to 55 and over, even though I debate in my mind 137 on 15 acres seems like a bit much, but 55 and over in that space, that's probably the appropriate situation. So all you have to do to answer this question for you is think about the reasons why somebody would come to Woodbridge. Because if you're going to support a restaurant, a shop, a coffee shop, all these ancillary businesses, think about why you would come to Woodbridge. Think about it, okay? No, to visit, not just the schools, because you already live here, okay? And I'll give you the list. There may be a couple others. The JCC, these are out of town people come to Woodbridge because they come to JCC and maybe they end up at Amity Meats, okay? Or maybe they end up at one of the other little restaurants or shops. Crest, it's not very frequent you're visiting Crest other when you're servicing your vehicle.
Buy a Jag every week.
Okay? The bowling alley, Oak Lane, although you may not see them very much, and depending which way they come in, maybe Katz's Deli and Saloon, and New England Brewery. That's it. That's your list. Okay? Now I want you to put on the hat the other way. Think about why you go to Orange and Milford and some of the other areas.
And oh, by the way, when you go to those areas, you end up shopping in other places. And I think the comments that were made here tonight about proper development and that you don't do things and, you know, someone said, I saw a 250 square foot box. Okay, obviously, now that you kind of understand the, okay, I guess any size box was allowed before, so obviously the 250 was more controlled. But someone who had never read this before, just reading 250, oh my God, that's twice the size as the Kohl's over in Orange. So, or that could be West Haven. And so that could be too big. But you know, sometimes, you know, when you look at maybe a box, and maybe not a lot of boxes, that would bring people to Woodbridge. And I think about the building that Jim Urbano, with all the shopping, it's a beautiful building with offices and shops and that type of thing. But what it's missing is the anchor store. It doesn't have the anchor store, okay? And no, we don't want Walmart, we get that, okay? Probably don't want Target either, okay? Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Boy, people would come here then. Oh wow, wait a minute. Would people come to Woodbridge if we had that? And they'd use the other businesses. See, Leslie was right. There's not enough population in Woodbridge to support the businesses. But it's how you get the population here to support the businesses is what it's all about. I know this. I've been doing this for over 40 years in the franchise industry. A couple other points here that probably you need to just, I put on my list here. A lot of the information in what I read here, in this package, the information about gas stations is very old school. Gas station or petroleum companies don't build gas stations anymore with service bays. They don't do that. Okay? Cumberland Farms today builds what is basically a convenience store and restaurant is what they build. They actually build pretty nice ones, actually. I know we're against that, but that's actually what they do is a lot more attractive. What we allowed, and actually I spoke when that gas station was being developed, and it's actually, I give the guy credit for the way he figured it out. You know, he's only allowed 30% convenience store, you know, for a gas station. And I know the spot where he's at, it wouldn't have worked for a restaurant, it wouldn't have worked for a retail store because it's too hard to get in and out. Similar to that little place that's across from the cleaners there that doesn't make it because it's too hard to get in and out of that space.
Somebody's going in there again.
Oh, well, how long? What's the over-under on that? Okay? So, when you look at that type of business, no, they don't build at the service bays anymore. Yeah, that's what a Midas or a Monroe or whatever, that's what they do, or the dealerships do. The gas station business, they're not into the repair. They don't build gas stations with repairs anymore. And the guy there in the gas station down there, you know, they actually was approved. There's supposed to be someone sitting in a little hut out there all the time. Fortunately, most people play with a credit card. A couple other pieces. Obviously, the school, with that change, if the development in that area was not 55 and over, our schools would be absolutely flooded with people. I would suggest speaking with if you haven't already spoken with the superintendent of the schools, not only Woodbridge, but Amity, because this obviously has a carryover effect. My office used to be at 15 Research Drive, okay? And I can tell you, you know, we were in like 2,500 square feet, and there was only like 4 of us in that office, so it was really, we really had more space than we needed. The people that took our place when we left, a lot more people in there, and there weren't enough parking then. There wasn't enough parking then, so I'm not sure about that. The other thing I also learned when I was at 15 Research Drive, I needed to either leave at 4:30 or 6 o'clock, because in between, there was only 3 cars could get out when the light turns green. Couldn't get out, okay? I do agree, the comment that was made before, whatever we're going to do in this area is really kind of held up by resolving the issue with the traffic and whatever the state does, because all we're really looking at doing here is whatever development happens here is putting 10 pounds of you know what, and it's already a problem already, okay? I know my daughter goes every day, she travels to Hamden, okay? And I've been trying to teach her how you go the back way, okay? Or, okay, you know, you go down, you make the left, or you cut through the Amity liquors there, because you can't go down the other way, I know that, okay? My dentist is in North Haven. I never schedule a 9 o'clock appointment. I'll never make it, okay? Also, just one other thing when I was looking at definitions. A fast food restaurant does not just cook with a microwave, okay? And I guess with this new thing, this fast casual term that's out there now, which is kind of like Boston Market's what's called fast casual. Panera is fast casual. Chipotle is considered fast casual. Many people may just see that as fast food, but they really kind of are going after the millennials and that type of thing. And that is actually a big part of the development right now. Millennials are more apt to purchase in a fast casual restaurant than a sit-down restaurant. And the research says it's because they don't like a tip, okay? Right? It's like, oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, exactly, I get it. So you probably need to just make a change there because fast food does not actually just cook with a microwave. They actually do use fryers and grills and so on and so forth. So those were my comments. I wish you luck as you work through the rest of this, and hopefully the input that everyone's given you here hopes gets to a place that is acceptable to everyone. Thank you.
Hi, Ed Weinberg from 24 Ranch Road. I guess there was one thing that kind of hit me the wrong way. When they were talking about putting like a retail on the first floor, and then the second and third could be either office or residential. And I'm hearing that, and I guess that what bothers me is there's a huge difference on the impact on Woodbridge between those two. Generally, an office above it is going to be positive as far as how much money we're going to make from taxes. However, if there's one kid in the apartment up there, it costs about $15,000. You put another unit on top of that, let's put 2 kids in that one. Well, that's at least $30,000 that it's going to cost just for the extra kid in the school. So there's a big difference between saying, well, we're going to put this here and it can be either this or that, and who's making that decision? I imagine that the developer would, but that seems to be something that maybe we should control because it's going to directly affect our taxes. And if you put enough kids in there, then rather than having these new buildings add to our tax base, they're going to subtract. Going to be a net subtraction from our tax base, and that affects. We have some of the highest taxes in the area, and as we raise the taxes, we're lowering our home values, and that's just something that we've seen too much of. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steph Charleglio from 166 Center Road, and I have 2 pieces of property on Merritt Avenue also, 2 family houses. I have a letter here from about 70 residents, because we only had 3 days to look at this. We didn't really have much notification, unfortunately. And most of everything has already been discussed in here, so I'm not going to go over it again, but I'd like to put it into the record, and if you would take the time to read this and see the residents who are from all over town. I have 2 questions. You know, most of everything that's on here has been addressed already. Unfortunately, I don't think you've addressed the apartments that you plan on putting in. How many apartments? And I also see in here that you have in 2 different spots that there's big box. The gross area of any individual retail store shall be limited to a maximum of 250,000 square feet. Wow. The Costco is 120,000 square feet. The Walmart in Milford is 179,000 square feet. I don't know what kind of building you could build there, and I don't know why that's in there. In another spot, it's 200,000 square feet. It's in 2 different places in here. There's also a 5-story maximum in T4. And I'd like you to address that. I think that's a big problem too. And that's all I have.
Yeah, we're boring them.
Okay, just a few comments. I could spend an hour, but mostly people have addressed most of the things we'd like to learn more about. However, I think one of my biggest disappointments is not necessarily the time and effort you put in is amazing. I know I sat through a lot of those meetings. I was liaison for a long time to this commission. I know the hours that Leslie puts in and the commission had to put in. However, I feel that somewhere on the line you lost the forest through the trees a little, and it became about residential development and the door it's opened up. And from what I understand, there may be a difference of opinion on what your plan, or at least the final draft that I've seen, is actually saying to you and means to you, and what it may mean to others, including experts in the field. So my question's my comments are pretty basic. The disappointment I have is I don't think you've ever had other experts come in and offer their opinion. Other department heads from the town come in and discuss what implications it may have on the town with their departments. We have experts in the field. I mean, we have a building department with Terry and Christine. I don't know, have they weighed in this officially? Have they written a paper to say how they feel the effects would be? I certainly would like to hear from them. I believe both of them have been working for us for about 20 years. We think of them as experts. We certainly like to hear their opinions on this. I'd like you to have the Board of Ed come in and discuss what implications. I mean, our Board of Ed at Beecher, I'm sure could tell you we're at a bubble. We have the highest enrollment in our school system than any town in the state of Connecticut. 169 towns. That's over the last 7 years. That's not me just quoting off the cuff or the internet. New Haven Register put out an article 2 months ago on a Sunday morning. There are only 3 school systems that have an increased enrollment over those 5 years in the region of 2011 to 2015. Woodbridge was number 1 with a 5% increase in that time. There were only 2 other towns that had an increased enrollment, New Canaan and Essex. Since those study was done, there's been 2 additional years. Both years, Woodbridge and Beecher saw even a larger increase. We're up 22% in 10 years in our enrollment. Most of the towns around us, all the towns around us, are down. It has a great effect on this town because we have a district school system when you get to middle school and high school. We pay per student. We have the finest school, in my opinion, in the state of Connecticut. A Blue Ribbon Award winning school. People come to this area for the schools. I came back to this area to bring my kids to the schools, and I bet 80% of this room moved here to bring their kids to our education. They're not going to stop coming. And unlike some towns, maybe people don't go from West Haven to Hamden for their school systems, or Hamden, New Haven. But they certainly come from New Haven, Hamden, and West Haven to ours. You're talking about 3 districts, 3 towns that have some of the lowest school rankings in the state of Connecticut. And they border a town like Woodbridge that has the best. So you bet you move. And if you could get rentals or the housing starts to go down in prices, you're going to come with your family. We have to be very careful of the rate of development. I believe in development. I believe the commercial area should certainly be refined. And I thought the idea of this process was to make it a little more uniformed, a little easier to bring small businesses, the type of businesses we want. Maybe it's commercial buildings, maybe it's professional buildings, maybe it's medical profession, medical billing. We have some of that already. But somewhere it seems like it went off foot. And I don't know, and I don't believe, you've asked some of the other professionals from town to come in. I'd like to hear Frank Cappiello, the police chief, tell us the effects it would have on them. How many more cars would he need if there were suddenly 200 more residents, 400 more residents? What else would he need? How about Sean Rowland, our fire department chief? I know he's gonna tell you 45-foot high buildings, which may be, we can argue whether it's 5 stories, 4 stories, 3 stories, but it's 45 feet high. I know he's gonna tell you they need a better ladder truck because they already feel that way, and they may be right, and they certainly would be right to start building buildings of this height. You know, we have a volunteer fire department. I don't know how much longer it could be volunteer fire department if you suddenly put in this kind of residential growth and commercial growth. It's a lot that could happen in a very short period of time. And I'll tell you the last thing. Not only have you not had the school board in and had those experts in and our town department heads, but you also haven't talked to the landowners in. I represent a family between personal property and our trust property that owns property in every single one of those districts. I looked at it very carefully. We own large parcels in some. And right now, we're not sure what we're doing. But I can tell you something right now. There are other landowners that I know in this room still, large land parcels, that are very concerned, but their opinion is all the same as is half my family. If this is something that goes through, you better believe these properties are gonna go up for sale. Because this is an opportunity to make money on these properties that we never had. And it's hard for some people not to take advantage of that opportunity. So if you think there's not people waiting in line, and by the way, my family or I have been contacted by 3 different developers waiting for this. Word was out quicker to the developers than it was to the people in town. So if you don't think it's coming because you say, well, there's certain parcels and nobody's really interested and nothing's happening, I could give you parcels right now that are available and will become even more so, and could put 90 units on, and could put 200 units on, and to what end? And then the race is gonna be who sells their property first, because we all know the first development or 2 are gonna be the successful ones. That's where people are gonna come, the young professionals. I know you want young professionals, I want young professionals. And mixed use brings that kind of thing. But to suddenly put 150 units in one place, 200 somewhere else, and 90, Woodbridge can't handle that growth. But I'm telling you right now, the landowners are prepared to make that available, because this might be their one chance. They don't want to live here anymore under those kind of conditions, but they're certainly willing to make money. So be very careful if you think there's not developers out there waiting for this to happen. This would be quick and it would be dramatic. So I just want you to consider that and talk, please talk to our department heads, please hear, because when the public gets to hear the fire chief say, hey, look, I gotta have 2 more trucks, I gotta have professional fire department, whatever he may say. And when Frank Capio, our police chief, tells everybody, we would have to have 2 more cars. We'd have to have 1 car on service at all times. We have 2 right now. We'd have to go to 3. I'm sure he'd say that. They already have a ton of incidents in that area. It's the highest density. It has the most commercial. Of course he has a lot of calls down there. How many more calls can he handle? His police department's being asked to cut their budget. The fire department's being asked to keep it their budget. There's no way it's reasonable to say they can do that any longer. Our school system is maxed out. They're looking to add a teacher and a half because we've already had that kind of growth. I discussed the growth we've had. Imagine what it would be if it was even 40 more kids a year, or 200. We simply can't handle the growth that quickly. We can handle growth, but let's plan it a little more slower. Let's figure out the kind of growth we want as a town, and let's keep within the town's character. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We're going to go back and obviously do some more. And we'll come back for more input when we have something else to show you.
Will you notify us?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, I'm happy to notify anybody. I just follow the process.
The town website, we got more notification on social media and Facebook about these meetings and.
But it is on the town. It is on the town website.
But this is a very important issue, and I think you should notify everyone, and I think, or tell us when you're gonna have the next meeting. But I think we
You
need
get
to
notice of every meeting.
I do, yes, and I sent it out to everyone, but I'm not supposed to send everything. It's your,
It's actually not. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Put the sign out in the street like they do for the plays.
Then I wonder why we're upset, because we don't know.